Hey, how's it going? In 1 minute, you're about to learn a very simple formula to help you find out how much traffic your Steam page needs if you want to reach your financial goals. And to make it even easier for you, I've created a template where you can, just simply plug in your numbers and it automatically calculates all the stuff for you, all the information, all the data, right? Also, I recommend that you open the template and in a separate browser so that way you can split screen what I'm doing here and with what you're doing, right? Just to make it a lot easier. So if you got the split screen going, that's great, and let's keep going. Okay, here's the formula and here's how it works. So basically, if you look at the spreadsheet, basically the Steam traffic formula, the formula is basically traffic equals sales divided by price divided by conversion, right? Or in other words, T equals S divided by P divided by C. So let's go through the ingredients first, and then I'll show you how to plug in the numbers and find out how much traffic you need to reach your financial goals. So the first one is sales, and you need to have the end in mind, right? So how much do you want to make in a year in game sales, right? So in my example, I'm going to use 50 grand. And then next we need to know the price of the game, right? So basically, what are you going to charge for your game? And if you don't know this right now, that's okay. You can use a ballpark figure, and I'm going to use $10. So let me plug in this information, right? Well, let me keep going here. And then the conversion is basically, say 100 people visit your Steam page and one person, downloads or wishlists your game, then you have a 1% conversion rate, right? So out of 100, how many people bought or wishlisted your game is your conversion rate. So basically 1 divided by 100 equals 1% per conversion rate. And I'm going to use 3%. And, and don't get me wrong, 3% is pretty high. It's really hard to even, in fact, to get 1%, but I'm going to use 3% because that's the goal I always make when I want to, for my conversion rates. So let's plug in those numbers right now. So in my example, I'm using 50 grand as my end goal, right? My 50 grand is how much I want to make in a year. The game price, I'm going to be $10 just as an example. And my conversion rate is 3%. So basically, here's your sales, 50 grand. The price is $10 and conversion is 3%. So I'll need almost 170 grand or 170,000, people to visit my Steam page if I want to make 50 grand using $10 price point and a 3% conversion. But to make it easier, because it's hard to your mind to understand 170,000 people, that's kind of hard to understand. So I like to chunk it down and make it a little more consumable or make more sense. So what I do is take this number and I divide it by 365 to get how many people I need in one day in order to reach my financial goals of 50 grand a year. So I'll need 457 people every day if I want to reach my financial goals. So in the next portion, the next section, I'm going to talk about how to use this formula to help you, increase your traffic and increase your conversion rate. So when you first start off your game company, it's easy to keep, basic stats in your head, right? But at some point, you can't keep all this data about your game studio in your head. You'll need to build a system around everything you know. So, because you see, growing your game company doesn't happen by accident. Yeah, sure, you can work hard every day and you push yourself and you hustle and you hope that you get more traffic and you hope that, you get a good conversion rate. But the reality is a game company will never grow unless the game, dev or you turns what's inside their brain into a process that they can test and they can measure to see what they're doing is working, right? So I'm saying is that we need to take what's in our brain and create an instrument called basically a business system. So, and why? Well, because we don't want to make business decisions based on assumptions. What we want to do is make business decisions based on what the data shows. So what I mean is once you know what you need, it's like, for example, I need 457 daily visitors and I need to reach a 3% conversion rate, then now I have a concrete goal, right? Now you know exactly where you need to go. And now you can start measuring your actions and your efforts to see if you're getting closer to those goals or not, right? But if we don't create a business system, then all we have is basically our assumptions, right? And often what we assume is going to happen doesn't really happen, right, in real life. And we never know if our actions are getting closer to our goals or not if we just, go off our assumptions. So let me show you a concrete example of everything I'm talking about, right? So say you post videos about your game on TikTok and YouTube, and you notice that, TikTok gets more views than YouTube. So intuitively in your head, you would assume that most of your traffic is coming from, TikTok to your Steam page, right? But in business, success is counterintuitive and results are counterintuitive. So we can't just assume things. We need to take what's in our head and test our assumptions against what's really happening in the real world. We need data to tell us actually what's happening because, again, what we often think is happening is not what's happening. Anyway, back to my example. So let's say TikTok gets more views than YouTube, but now you know that you need to test your assumptions in real life just to be sure to know what you think is going on is actually what is going on. So then you decide to do a test and to see which drives more traffic, TikTok or YouTube. So to do this test, you use Steam's traffic tools to find out how much traffic you're getting from TikTok and how much traffic you're getting from YouTube. And by the way, you probably know this already, but Steam has two amazing resources to help you track traffic. So there's the Steam's UTM analytics tool, and then there's the Steam's reporting. I think it's called the reporting tool. And basically, I now have the link in the description for those tools for you to check out if you haven't already. Anyway, back to my example. So like I said, TikTok is getting more TikTok is getting more views than YouTube, but now you decide to do a test and see which source is getting you more traffic, right? So after running the test, you get the results and you find out that even though TikTok gets more views, YouTube is the one that drives 80% of the traffic to your Steam page, right? And this is just an example, right? But for, some games TikTok works and for some games it doesn't. And the whole point here is that you need to test your assumptions because, just because one game dev said that, TikTok worked for them doesn't mean it will necessarily work for your game, right? And vice versa, maybe YouTube doesn't work for you. But again, you need to test because if you haven't done this test, then it's safe to assume that TikTok, will drive a lot more traffic than YouTube because it gets more views, right? That's a safe assumption, but you would be wrong, right? Because you haven't done the actual test. And then worse, what happens is now you allocate your time and your resources into an action or, into TikTok that's not necessarily working for you. And the reason I'm so hard on, test is because when I talk to a lot of game devs, they hardly do any tests. And when you do test, it will shatter all your assumptions, and that's a good thing. So again, we need to test our assumptions because what seems intuitive is often wrong, and what seems to work in our head often doesn't work in real life. Again, that's because business success is often counterintuitive, and the only way to discover new insights is to track and test what you're doing. All right, let's keep going and let's set up your business system so that you can, use the system to help you discover ways to increase traffic and improve your conversion rate. And the best part here is I've done almost all the work for you. All you have to do is plug in your numbers, and the business system does all the math for you and does everything automatically. So let's stop hoping that your game studio grows, and let's use data to help you increase your traffic to your Steam store page, and let's use data to help you improve your conversion rate. So here's how to do it. Okay, in this section, I want to talk about how to use a Steam traffic formula, basically what we just did in the beginning, to help you reach your financial goals. So if you notice in this Steam traffic formula, there's 3 tabs, right? There's this one, the one you just did right now. Then I have the daily conversion tracker, which is a monster here. And then I have points to remember. So let's go into the second one called the daily conversion tracker, because like I said, we already did the Steam traffic formula already, right? So let's get into here and I'll explain how this works. All right, so remember, you can hope that your game studio grows, or you can set up a business system that helps you monitor what you're doing. And that the reason why you're doing all of this is because you want to see what's working and what's not. And the best way to do that, this again, is to test, right? So you want to deliberately create a business system so that you have basically an instrument that helps you increase, your traffic and improves your conversion rates. So if you remember, I needed 457 daily visitors if I wanted to reach, 50 grand a year. That was my goal, right? Also, my other goal is to reach a 3% conversion rate. Okay, so now that we know where we want to go, let's use data to help reach our financial goals. So to do that, let's go into the second tab. So basically, again, it's the daily conversion tracker. And what you'll notice is that you'll track the following stats. So you have your daily traffic, then you'll have your wish lists, and you'll have your units sold, and then your price. This is where you're going to be entering your own data using the Steam traffic tools, right? Which, and again, I have the links are in the description below. All right, let's keep going. I'll show you how all of this works. So here's my example, and I basically entered this manually myself. And this is, like I said, you'll have to manually enter all this data yourself. So the first one is the date, and I'm starting January 1st, 2024, but this date can be, your launch date can start here, whatever your launch date was, so you can start tracking sales on the day of your launch. Or it can be, the fiscal year of your business, whenever you start, usually, March or April, whenever, right? Okay, so this is daily traffic. And in my example, I just, plotted in, what a simple increase in traffic. So this will come from Steam stats, right? And then also wish list will come from your Steam stats and your units sold, and then your price. So price is interesting because for majority of the time, your price will stay the same if you decided on a price. But sometimes you'll have, Steam sales, right? And sometimes you want to be testing pricing. So maybe you'll fluctuate and not use $10. Maybe you'll try $9.75, right? Or so over here. So I'll get into this. So let's jump into this column now, right? So in H10 here and below, this is where you're gonna track all your actions and all the events or updates, anything that you do during the process of your game sales or after your launch. And this is important because sometimes you'll get a spike. Say I got a spike here, for example, in daily traffic. Again, this is important because you want to track any spikes in game sales or wish lists and why it happened, right? Well, and the reason you want to do this is because once you know what's working, you want to keep doing what's working. You want to find out what's not working and stop doing that, right? So for example, say I wanted to test new price, and I would write down here, right? And then I would watch the wish list or sales and see what happens. And in my points to remember, I'm going to get into a few things that you might hang you up when you are tracking, because there could be a delay in events, right? So if you test new price, $9.75, the spike might happen, 3 or 4 days later, and you want to keep track of that too, right? But anyway, so again, the reason why we're doing all of this manual work here, your daily plotting and all your stuff, is because you want to basically optimize all your efforts. So for example, if you want to find out which drives more traffic, TikTok or YouTube, instead of, measuring the success by looking at, likes or comments or subscribers or views, you measure the performance of each platform in terms of, Steam page traffic, the actual number. Does it get you traffic or doesn't, right? Because it doesn't matter if your TikTok videos get, 10,000 views if only 93 people visit your Steam page, right? So what matters is, did the video, get traffic, or did the video not get traffic, like I said before? And again, it's not about exposure. And, some people will argue with me that, this is good for branding, that, 10,000 views is amazing. Even if it gets, 10 or 20 people, to go to your Steam page, you're getting a lot of exposure, right? And you'll probably hear this often too. And I hear this, a lot of people tell me this too, that somebody has to see your stuff like 7 times before they decide to buy it, right? That's how branding works. But in my experience, most people will only see your stuff one time, right? You only have one chance to grab their attention and to get them motivated enough so they do visit your Steam page. And I say this because, having a small or medium-sized business or like a studio like you don't have millions you can spend on branding and get your name out there, right? And you don't have the luxury to getting your stuff out there in front of people 7 times in a row, because you need to be a AAA company to do that, right? You need a lot of money to pump into branding to get that type of exposure. So remember, most players will see your stuff only once, and so you only have one single chance to grab their attention. So this is the reason why you're keeping track and putting all this effort into tracking all your data, is because you want to find out what's working and what's not, and trying to optimize your daily efforts, right? And remember, most of your efforts won't work, and most of your marketing you put out there won't grab attention. So 90% of the stuff, 80% of the stuff that you're experimenting or trying to put out there is not going to work. But by tracking all your efforts and watching, the numbers, you'll discover those actions that do work. And this is how you improve your traffic, by taking actions, getting feedback, and analyzing the numbers, and then refining, the things you're doing. This is how you optimize your efforts. And then eventually you find that one way, that one effort that is, working and getting you traffic. And then you put all your time and your commitment and resources in developing that what is working. But what most game devs do is they just basically start posting wherever, whenever they want, right? And they have no idea what's working or not. They'll look at views or likes, and they'll use that as a measure to say, oh, it's working, right? And again, getting exposure is, it's fine, it's good. You do want exposure, but you want to see if that exposure is actually working and getting, actually people motivated to come visit your Steam page, right? Or some game devs, what they'll do is just rely on Steam and hope for organic traffic and hope that Steam will do, the marketing for them, right? But that's not how you take your game company to the next level. We need to watch carefully, what works and what doesn't. And again, this is important because you only have so much time and energy in one day. And if you're wasting 80% of your effort and only getting 20% of your results, then your game studio isn't going to grow, right? So the idea here is to use this, this page, all this reporting stuff, all this data, is to find that 20% of your activities in your business that get 80% of the results. So find those activities that generate 80% of the results, and then put all your time and your resources developing, those activities. All right, let's move on to the next section here. And basically, so this is where you enter your stuff manually, and this is where all the magic happens, where I did all the calculations and to show you in one spot if your stuff is working or not. Okay, so then here is the sales you made that day. So basically, it's multiplying your price by the units sold, right? So on this day you made $20, or my example, I made $20, right? Then here is the cumulative traffic. So basically, on January 1st, I got 1 visitor, right? And then on January 2nd, I have accumulated 6 people that, or people that visited my site. So this is important to track, because this will help. I'm going to use this number to help you, or to help to find out the conversion rate. And then I want to track wish list, and I want to do the same thing and get cumulative wish list, because I'm going to use this number to find out the conversion rate. So again, on January 1st, I had no wish lists. Second, no wish lists, but then on the 3rd, I got 3 wish lists, and then on the 4th, I got 1 wish list. So again, it all accumulates to 4, so far wish lists. And I know this might be obvious to you, but I'm just trying to explain. Sometimes you see a spreadsheet, and you're like, "What's going on?" And then you have to kind of reverse engineer things and see how it works. So I'm explaining the basics here right now. So next, again, cumulative units sold. So it's the same thing as before. I'm accumulating the number per day, right? And then here is when, this is where the wish list conversion rate, this is where I'm going to use all this data to find out your actual conversion rate. So like, again, there was no wish list the first 2 days. So then on the 3rd, in my example, I had 10 people that visited my Steam page, and I had 3 people wish list my game. So, 3 divided by 10 is 18.75%. So it's a really good conversion rate. But again, you want to do this over time and not in, the short term, because short term results are way different than long-term results. So I'm keeping track of everything in terms of short term, but then in the end, I'm going to have a spot where you see everything that's happening in the long term. So anyway, as the days go by, you enter, say on February 4th, I had 1,000 visitors. 1,000 visitors. And then I had my wish list that day was 90, and I got 1 sale, and my price was still $10. And so this, as you go, this will populate and update everything as you enter your data every day. So again, this is where you put your stuff manually, and this is where the formulas, automatically calculate your wish list conversion and your sales conversion. Then over here, I want to put everything in one spot. So you don't, this is where you're doing your work. And then over here on the right side, on this spot, you're going to see how you're doing so far. So cumulative sales up to, whatever last date in my example is $394. My daily traffic average. So I'm thinking, the average here is 25 people every day. Again, my goal was 457. So I'll get to that soon here, right? But so my daily traffic is 25. My wish list conversion rate is 12.88. So wish list would probably convert higher, than 3%, but expect under 10%. So this is just an example, right? And my conversion or sales conversion rate is 0.57%. So again, remember my goals were, 3% conversion, and I want, 457 people to join or to, visit my Steam page, because if I get that, then I'm going to reach my goal of 50 grand a year, right? So here, what I did here is basically a simple graph. So here's my goal again. I want $50,000 a year, right? And this is how much I'm making, how much sales I have had so far. So I want to compare and see one spot how I'm doing so far. And then here's my daily traffic goal versus my actual daily traffic. So like again, I need 457 people to visit my Steam page if I want to reach my goals, right? And so far I'm getting 25 on average. Again, this is great information because I want to see that my efforts are working or not, right? Okay, in the last graph, I kind of had to change some numbers because I had 1% instead of 3. But anyway, so my goal is to reach 3%, and so far I'm getting 0.57%. Okay, there's one more tab, and that is points to remember. And in this tab, I've noted down some important points to remember when, testing and tracking. Because I know through experience that I've stopped testing because the results I was getting, made no sense. And it felt like I was just basically wasting my time manually entering all this data and all this stuff. But eventually I learned that testing and tracking is an ongoing process and you got to trust the process, right? So let me share with you some insights that I learned when I did my own testing and tracking. So if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. So this was a quote from Edward Deming. And the reason I bring up this quote is because most of the stuff that I've learned from stats and from tracking and testing came from Deming, right? And he was a statistician who first developed a sampling, or used sampling techniques in the U.S. Census in the 1940s. And he was also a business expert, and he helped Japan rebuild their economy after World War II. So for instance, he helped, companies like Sony, basically dominate the industry, right? The electronics industry. Anyway, I like that quote because it kind of reminds me that you gotta, tracking is very important if you want your business to grow. Okay, let's keep moving. So here are a few points to remember when testing and tracking so that you don't get discouraged and when you get your results, and that you don't stop, doing this daily. So here's the plan. The plan is basically you set minimal, simple conditions, you run the system, and then you watch the results, and then you refine after getting the data, and then you discover something, some new insights, and then you test again, right? So for example, if you want to change your Steam capsule art, but before you do that, you run a test with the old capsule art, you track, the traffic and wish lists, then you change the capsule, and then you run the system again, and you track the traffic and wish list. So that way you can compare the old capsule with the new capsule and see if it worked or not, right? Or if it's, the change is positive or not. So yeah, so basically these are just simple, quick reminders that, when you are testing, that there will be variables that you can't foresee, that long-term and short-term results will often be very different. And you got to keep in mind that results might be delayed. So for example, say you are tracking, a YouTuber, a YouTuber watched your video with 100,000 subs. It might be a couple days before you see a spike in your wish list, right? So there might be a delay, and you might be put up a TikTok video, and you might assume that that TikTok video was the reason for the spike, but it could have been something that you've done before. So you got to expect there will be delays in the results. Also, you got to know that even the smallest changes in testing can have side effects. So even if you change your capsule art, it might have a lot of side effects that you might not have considered, right? Also, it's important to track your data visual because, numbers on a spreadsheet don't really show the whole picture, right? So this is why I have these graphs for you, right? You got to have some visual element to see in one spot what's working or not. So you need to track results over time because, like I said, short-term results often are very different from long-term results. And you need to look for unintended consequences and expect them because sometimes, what you think is going to happen often doesn't. So you kind of have to assume that there will be problems that you've never even would consider, right, when you're testing. And the idea here is to discover what's working for you and then focus all your efforts and energy and resources into what is working, and then to develop that and get rid of the stuff that isn't working. So like I said, try to find that activity that is, 20% of your day that gets you 80% of the results, and get rid of the stuff that you work on 80% of the day that only gets you 20% of the results. Also, I want you to watch out for things like bottlenecks and constraints, because sometimes what you think is working can often is what is halting and stopping everything, right? Okay, and lastly, I kind of want to talk about your conversion rate and how to improve and get a better conversion rate. So it's a lot easier to increase conversion rates than it is to get more traffic. So, traffic is very important to figure out. But like I said, it's easier to increase your conversion rate than it is to increase your traffic. So in other words, it's a lot easier to raise your conversion rate from 1% to 3% than it is to, increase traffic from 100 to 300, right? In fact, the more traffic you get, the lower your conversion rate is. And why? Well, because sometimes the quality of your traffic goes down when it starts to increase. So for example, who cares if you get 10,000 people, or players to visit your Steam page if they're not a fan of your genre, right? It's a lot better to find, 1,000 fans that are hardcore, fans of that genre than it is to find, 10,000 people that are lukewarm. Why? Well, because if you focus on the quality of your traffic, then it will naturally help you, increase your conversion. That's because you're not trying to sell or convince other people that aren't into your genre. And you're not trying to convince, non-fans to buy your game. If you can attract people who are, fans of your game, then you don't have to do any selling. You don't have to convince them, right? Of course, if you're a AAA company that, already has a large customer base and you can spend millions on branding and PR, and then, traffic is very important to you. That number is important because numbers are important because that mass is more important than, the quality, right? But if you're a new studio with a, small customer base, then you need to focus on the quality of your traffic and not quantity. So I want you to look at, more your conversion rate rather than traffic. So again, traffic is important, but conversion, the quality of your traffic is way more important than the actual number. So again, remember the idea here is if you want your game studio to grow, you need to track what you do to figure out, what's working or not. You want to discover, ways to optimize your time. So for example, if YouTube brings in 80% of your traffic, then it's worth, your time and effort to post more on YouTube. So maybe you don't need to put in all that effort into TikTok or Reddit or into Twitter, right? You can actually stop doing all that stuff and take that extra time and work on your game, right? Make it better, right? So remember, you want to discover those activities that net you 80% of the results. And you don't want to spend, 80% of your effort on an activity that, gets you 20% of the results. So use this Steam traffic formula to, create a business system so that you can discover those activities that get you 80% of your results. And do this so you can optimize your marketing efforts and find those activities that increase your traffic and your conversion rate, right? And again, when you first start your game company, you might be able to keep all of this data in your head, right? All of this information. But as your game studio grows, all of this stuff you once kept in your brain, in your head, needs to be put into a process that you can measure and test, right? So start small, at least track your traffic, your wish list, and your sales and your conversion. And you don't necessarily need to use my template, right? You can use the ideas here and create your own template. But what's important here is that you take your knowledge and your assumptions and you create a process that you can test and measure, because sometimes what you think is going on is not necessarily what is really going on, right? And that's because, again, like I said, business is counterintuitive. So do this right now and open the Steam traffic formula spreadsheet. And the reason why I want you to do this like right now is because learning only happens when you take some action. So for example, I can, read a book about, how to ride a bike or shoot a basketball, but I mean, learning hasn't happened until I take some action, right? And I do something in real life. So it's not until you walk up to the line and you start shooting that, you start learning that is, because it changes your behavior. So what I want you to do right now is to open the Steam traffic formula and just plug in the numbers. There's 3 numbers, right? Your how much money you want to make in the year, the price of your game, and then put in 3% conversion rate, and this will show you how much daily traffic you need. And just knowing this number will help you redirect your efforts on to see what's working and what's not. But again, it's really important to track this data daily so that you can see how your efforts are affecting wish lists and game sales. And do this because you'll discover insights that will help you come up with business strategies to help you increase your traffic and improve your conversions, right? Because you can sit all day and think and strategize about ideas, but sitting and thinking won't get you those insights that you can get when you actually test and see what's really going on. All right, my name is Darius. I hope the Steam traffic formula helped you, give you an idea on how your game is doing so far. I know there's a lot here, so if you're stuck, if you have any questions, in the description below, there's a link to where you can contact me. There's an email, or you can reach me at my Discord and ask me some questions there, and I'll be glad to help you out. There's no cost. The reason is because, if I can help you out, then that gives me ideas for content for my blog and for these videos. So go ahead. Don't be shy. Send me an email. Tell me where you're stuck, and I'll be glad to help you out. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.